Have you ever heard of places where people fear to go? Places where strange whispers fill the night air, where those who enter often fall ill or worse, never return. Today's story is not just a tale, it is a true historical event that has been passed down through generations. A story of a man who, out of curiosity, stepped into a realm where humans are forbidden. What happened to him that night changed his life forever. And it may just change how you see the world around you. The year was 1850, deep in the deserts of Hejaz, modern-day Saudi Arabia. A young man named Abdul Rahman had just completed his Hajj pilgrimage and was making his way back home. He was a righteous and God-fearing man, deeply devoted to his prayers. His journey took him across an ancient desert path, one rarely used by travelers. As the sun began to set, he found himself near a mysterious well that stood alone in the middle of the vast wilderness. The well was old, so ancient that its stone walls were covered in strange carvings, symbols that did not belong to any human civilization he knew of. It was oddly silent, as if even the desert wind refused to pass by. As he approached, he saw an old, frail man sitting nearby, watching him with tired, sunken eyes. "Stranger," the old man said in a weak voice, "you should not be here." Abdul Rahman was confused. "Why?" he asked. The old man sighed. "This well does not belong to us, it belongs to them. Those who disturb it do not live to tell the tale." Abdul Rahman, being a devout believer, dismissed it as mere superstition. Only Allah has power over all things, he thought. He thanked the old man for his concern, but decided to rest there for the night. Little did he know, something was already watching him from the depths of the well. Gathering every ounce of his courage, Abdul Rahman took a deep breath and steadied his trembling voice. "Who are you?" he asked, his words barely more than a whisper in the chilling desert air. The shadowy figure stood motionless for a moment, its presence growing heavier, more suffocating. Then it chuckled, a deep, guttural sound, unlike anything human. The voice that followed sent a wave of dread coursing through Abdul Rahman's veins. "We are the ones who see you, though you do not see us," the entity murmured, its tone dripping with ancient menace. "This land has been ours for centuries. Those who intrude do not leave alive." A cold dread wrapped itself around Abdul Rahman's heart. His instincts screamed at him to flee, but his legs refused to move. It was as if the very air had thickened, trapping him in an unseen grip. The darkness around him deepened. The desert wind died into eerie silence, and the only sound was his own ragged breathing. Then, without warning, the entity raised its arm. A force, invisible, immense, and crushing, slammed down on Abdul Rahman's shoulders. His knees buckled, and he collapsed onto the cold sand, struggling for breath. It felt as if an enormous weight had been placed upon him, pressing his very soul into the earth. His vision blurred, his surroundings twisted into a suffocating haze, and a low, deafening hum filled his ears. His heartbeat thundered in his chest, faster than ever before. Sweat dripped from his brow, yet his entire body felt ice cold. For the first time in his life, Abdul Rahman felt the true presence of death. It loomed over him, unseen but undeniable. A force beyond human comprehension held him captive, and in that terrifying moment he realized this was not a nightmare. This was real. Would he survive, or would he become another forgotten soul swallowed by the darkness? At that moment, when the crushing force of the unseen entity pinned him to the ground, Abdul Rahman's mind screamed in terror. His body trembled. His breath came in ragged gasps, and his vision darkened at the edges. Was this how it would end? Alone in a cursed desert, claimed by something not of this world? But then, deep within the depths of his soul, a spark of faith ignited. Seek refuge in Allah. The words of the scholars, the teachings of his elders, echoed in his mind. Through sheer instinct, a desperate clinging to the only hope he had left, Abdul Rahman forced himself to part his trembling lips. "A'udhu bi kalimatillahi at-tammati min sharri ma khalaq." I seek refuge in the perfect words of Allah from the evil of what He has created. His voice was weak at first, barely audible over the deafening hum that filled his ears. But he pressed on. He had no other weapon, no escape, only his faith. With every ounce of strength left in him, he began reciting Surah Al-Falaq and Surah An-Nas. Kul a'udhu birabbil falaq, min shari ma khalaq. The moment the sacred words left his lips, something shifted in the air. The crushing weight on his shoulders eased slightly, as if the unseen force recoiled from the verses. The shadow let out a low, guttural hiss like a wounded beast. But Abdul Rahman did not stop. He clenched his fists in the sand, drawing strength from the divine words, and continued his recitation. Wa min shari gasikin idha wakab, wa min shari an-nafathati fil ukad. The entity screamed. Not a normal scream, not the cry of any human throat. It was a sound of pure agony, a shriek so unearthly that the air itself seemed to tremble. The shadow twisted violently, its form writhing and distorting as though being consumed by an unseen fire. The desert around them crackled with invisible energy. The darkness that had once loomed so thick began to peel away, as if the very night rejected the creature's presence. Then, with one final soul-piercing wail, the entity vanished into the void. Silence. For a long moment, Abdul Rahman remained frozen, his body trembling. The absence of the shadow left the air feeling lighter, but his chest still heaved with exhaustion. His heart pounded against his ribs, his throat burned, and his clothes were soaked with sweat despite the cold desert night. He had survived, but he had no intention of waiting to see if the thing would return. With shaking hands, Abdul Rahman grabbed his belongings, his bag heavy but his steps urgent. His legs almost gave out beneath him as he forced himself to stand. His feet stumbled, but he did not dare look back. Without another second of hesitation, he ran. Across the endless dunes, through the quiet night, he fled from the cursed well and the horrors he had witnessed. The whispers still echoed in his mind, but he clung to the strength of the verses that had saved him. And as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, he vowed never again would he stray into the lands of the unseen. By dawn, he reached a nearby village and immediately sought out a renowned Islamic scholar. When he described what had happened, the scholar listened with grave concern. "That well is ancient," the scholar explained, "and the beings that reside there are not from our world. You were spared only because of your faith in Allah's words. Many before you were not so fortunate." Abdul Rahman shuddered, realizing how close he had been to losing his soul to the unseen. This terrifying event is a reminder for all of us. There are places where humans should not go, lands that belong to creatures beyond our understanding. The world of the Jinn is real, as mentioned in the Quran, and they exist just as we do. The power of the Quran can protect us from dangers that our eyes cannot see. So what do you think? Do you believe in cursed places? Have you or someone you know ever experienced something unexplainable? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love true, spine-chilling Islamic horror stories, subscribe to Horror Creation and hit the bell icon so you never miss another tale from the unseen world.